Hey guys, welcome to Hope It Helps. And my guest on the show today is Mr. Tariq Khan. Tariq, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. So Tariq, me and you actually connected. I'm sure my listeners are tired of hearing this through LinkedIn because like 90% of my guests have come through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I saw that you're the co-founder of My Wellbeing Lab and you're in the mental health space, which is my space. So anytime someone's doing something in mental health, I'm like, all right, let's sit down and talk about it because what I've noticed is although there's a lot of commonalities across the board, no matter what you're doing with it, everyone has a different like mission or perspective on how they want to tackle the issue or what's important from their perspective. So I wanted to have you on the show and dive deep into mental health and the work you do and so on. But before we get into everything, Tariq, why don't you give all of us a little bit of background about yourself and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from England, a place called Coventry.
Okay.
And so born and brought up there, and then moved to London for a couple of years in my early 20s. Then moved out here in 2014. Right at the start of 2014, and was working in like the event space. From there, went to like Kareem for a bit, worked there as partnership manager, and then went back into events. But as that's always been happening, mental health has been kind of either on the mind or been a part of life.
Okay.
Just kind of throughout the whole time, and I think even before when I was in the UK, but definitely more prevalent when I arrived here.
Okay. Interesting.
Just like dealing with being away from like the home comforts and things like that, and obviously going through certain things, and then it wasn't until I would say 2018 was when it was like I really want to get into this space. It's something that is interesting. I remember seeing I was in the UK and I saw a company that were hiring for someone in like the mental health space, and it was like a partnership manager role, and I was like, that's pretty cool, I'd love to do something like that. And I was in the UK at the time. I moved back for like 6 months before I came back here, and so like I was in the process of like interviewing with that job before I moved back, and I was like, but I really enjoyed like speaking to them. I thought it was great, and so I came back here, and that was always kind of on my mind, but nothing ever really happened. And then it wasn't until kind of last year before COVID, so like it was like a couple of weeks before when we went into lockdown. So in like right at the start of March, I did like a coaching course with To Be Limitless.
Okay.
And that kind of got me into the understanding of like mental health, but also coaching as well. And then it was this year when we launched My Wellbeing Lab, because we did launch something last year, but that was like in the middle of the COVID, and it just didn't really work out. Like it was more of a executive coaching thing. It wasn't really the right space for it at the time, so we waited, and then this year was My Wellbeing Lab. So this was the introduction.
Well, congrats on launching, man. My Wellbeing Lab, man. I've taken a look at what you guys do. I think it's interesting how I think you've structured it quite well in terms of specifically with working with like corporations, like having the discovery lab, workshop lab, and then the coaching lab. So it's finding out where you are right now, like where's your organizational health for that matter, and then transitioning from there and taking them through the process. Okay, here we are, and how are we going to get to the optimal thing or where you guys are trying to go.
Yeah.
And you said something interesting that you got into the mental health space in 2019, 2018, but it was always on your mind. And where, I guess, did you have your own experience with mental health that you're like, and you overcame it and you're like, okay, I want to help other people, get through this? Or what was it about? It was always on your mind. Could you explain that to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been there. There's always been like something in my mind that's I don't know, I've struggled with certain things, if it's putting too much pressure on myself, or self-doubt, or just negative talk and all of these things, which everybody does, but it wasn't until like a couple of years ago where it started getting really bad, and then I was kind of, I think towards the end of last year was when it kind of hit that point as well. I need to go and speak to somebody now and have a conversation about how I'm feeling, because this isn't normal. And I kind of went through life just having ups and downs. And it's, when you look at bipolar, it was like having that manic mania of being high and then low. And so when I spoke to a doctor first, who said you kind of have symptoms of this.
Okay.
And then after that, what I then did was see a therapist who has kind of helped me understand and unearth all of that. So yeah, I had the kind of struggles with it, but I just never really thought about, it's everyone has issues and everyone has their own thing. So I never really thought much of it, and I was like, I'll be fine. But it wasn't until I actually had a conversation, and then once I understood what was happening, and then started looking into it and reading into it more, you're like, oh my god, like this actually, you know what? There's this isn't normal. This isn't. No one should feel like this. And if everyone is feeling like this, then we've got some work to do.
100%.
Because this is not right. So yeah, I kind of did have that, but I was really wary of saying I never wanted to, when it was creating My Wellbeing Lab, I didn't want to portray my story.
Okay.
Which is a weird thing to say, but I think there's so many stories, and there's so many stories which are not like maybe more relatable for the people, I don't know, but like Tyson Fury has a story.
Yeah, exactly.
And once you hear the story, I'm only going to repeat similar things.
Okay.
Of what people are saying. So what I wanted to do was, instead of talking about it, let's do something about it instead. And so like have some actionable points instead of just giving a story out. So I was always quite wary about that. And I spoke to a couple of other people about maybe should I share a story, and they were like, yeah, like you should. But I don't know, I just felt like I never really wanted to put that out there, which again is probably the stigma of mental health overall, like of people not talking and not speaking out. I was always like, oh no, I don't want to burden people with 100%. My problems. But then after a while I've opened up and I've spoke to people more, and I'm quite open about it. And even when I have meetings with people, I tell them like, yeah, I had these feelings and these thoughts, and here we are now. And so yeah, it's weird because I talk to people about opening up the stigma of mental health and let's talk more and do all this, but I never did that myself, and I know I'm a co-founder of a mental health company, so if I can't do it, then Christ, it must be a lot harder for other people as well who aren't in this space and doing that sort of stuff.
Sure. I think you made a great point, and so I had someone on the podcast last week. He's a career coach.
Yeah.
And I was asking him, for example, like all the top athletes in the world, even they're experts in their field, but they have a coach to help them get to that next level or to like help them with their work. So I was asking him, as a career coach or like an executive coach like yourself, or like a coach in general, do you need another coach? And he said something that really stuck with me, and he's so true. He's like, Khalid, sometimes we need a coach or a mentor or someone to talk to give us perspective on ourselves, because he's like, as humans, we have a blind spot when it's very hard for us to be objective about ourselves. So when listening to your story, because I've been there too, I tell people, you should talk about your mental health and like push it out there, whatever. See, I can give you the best advice in the world, you know what I mean? You do that, whatever. And then when we're in for example, we're in the similar situation, we're like, yeah, maybe not for me,
I'm not going to do that, but you should do this.
Yeah, you should definitely do
Yeah.
it. So I really relate to that a lot. So I saw the report that you were part of with WAMDA and Empower and so on, and it was really interesting to read, like getting data on that and so on. And one thing that stood out to me was that 68% of startups prioritize mental health and mental well-being in their company culture. Now, given the work you've been doing so far, do you think, in your experience, in your opinion, it's easier to implement those kinds of things in a startup when comparing it to a large corporation?
Definitely easier in terms of, getting past red tape and implementing it when there's less employees. Definitely. I think as well, one of the big things is that, we've done some work with some like large corporations, but we've also done stuff with startups as well. And I think with the startups, especially in this region, there's more of an openingness to learn about mental health as well, instead of just, here's the product, go away and do something. Whereas I think we've had like a lot of conversations with teams, we've had a lot of discussions, and it's sometimes not even been around the coaching lab or the discovery lab. It's been around just talking to them and how they feel. And I think we did something recently where you know what's good about working with startups is you can add things here and there, and you can just like put things in.
Yeah.
And so we were talking. There was a report by Dr. Shane Fleming from the University of Cambridge. It was just a couple of months ago. He did it, and he talked about the effects of like webinars and the effects of workshops on mental health, and how some were positive and some were negative, and even though we thought they potentially could be positive, they were having negative effects. And one of the things he spoke about was how gratitude within corporate cultures and doing things for charity, or doing like a bake sale and raising money for charity and things like this, had a hugely positive effect on the overall team morale, but also how they felt as individuals.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a startup about this, and they were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so like, it's so much easier just to come up with ideas and do that. So yeah, I think there's definitely more of an openness to do things. However, I think with a lot of the companies here, there's always the talk about, okay, where can we fit this into our budgets? How can we afford to pay for something like this? How much of a priority is it? So some will place a huge priority on it, others will place kind of a medium level priority of it, and then some we have conversations, then it just fizzles out.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. So it's about getting them to understand and really see how it's going to benefit their people, but also one of the reasons why we did the Discovery Lab was that was more not even for our point of view, it was to show them.
Exactly. Yeah.
To give them that data.
Yeah. I think, first of all, I'd never heard about that. What's his name again? Fleming?
Dr. Shane Fleming.
Shane Fleming. That's listening to his explanation of it makes a lot of sense, because when you're doing something, for example, for charity, or doing some volunteer work, whatever the case might be, being of service as people naturally gives us fulfillment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For example, when I used to work in sales, but I'm selling, I don't really care about what I'm selling here. So I'm like, I'd like to sell something that could like genuinely help someone, to give me that fulfillment. So that's why I do what I do now with hypnotherapy and with the podcast. So I understand the concept of the importance of fulfillment. And coming back to what you said earlier, I think that you're right. With startups, since there's less people, number one, okay, yes, there's less red tape, but it's easier to ingrain that into the culture from day one. Versus like, let's say if you're a startup with like even 30 people, that's fine. It's small enough, you can put those in from the beginning. If those are there from the beginning, I think it's easier to build from it because it's been there since day one. But large corporations, for example, they've been going one way for like 30, 40, 50 years. They have hundreds of thousands of employees. So I think not just from a number of employees perspective and red tape and hierarchy and politics and all that shit, I think a culture thing, because I think you must have seen your experience. Culture is probably the most important, the thing we want to change the most, but the thing that is the hardest and takes the longest to do so. So I don't know, is like, from your perspective, do you think the way forward is to start with small like startups or like medium scale, start there, and hopefully that will like eventually create the culture for like everyone else to like join in? What do you think?
To be fair, yes and no. I think yes, definitely it will help with a lot of other startups. But also what I found is that when speaking with startups, they've also looked at these bigger companies and they've kind of tried to look at the ideas of what they're doing as well.
Okay.
And so it's like, what's kind of the plan of such large organisations? What are they doing and what's worked for them? Because it's great to see like that path of like, well, they took this path and that's worked, so maybe we should try that. So I think yes, it will help overall and boost, but I think at the same time you have to go for the big ones too, because a lot of people look at them and think, right, they're now making changes, they're at this level.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's two ways of looking at it, but I definitely do believe that if we were able to create like an ecosystem here of 10, 20, 30, 40 startups that all had the culture of prioritizing mental health and prioritizing mental well-being as a whole, that would only help not only the companies but the people within them, because those people might end up going to these large organizations and be like, oh, we used to have this tiny startup with 30 people and you guys have got all of this money and all of these people and you don't have this. We need to change that. So I think not from a company point of view, but just from individuals. And I think that's the most important thing, is that a lot of these companies need to stop thinking always about the company as so much of the people that are working for you. And I think that is the be all and end all at the moment.
So putting people first rather than the company first, or like profits and so on.
It has to. It's like a cheesy thing to say, like putting people first, and you hear it all the time, but it is so true.
It's the reality. They are your company. Then if all those people leave, you have no company. So think of it like that's how I like to think of it.
Yeah, and it was like 7 out of 10 millennials like identify themselves with their job.
I can see that.
So it's that identity of you is, you know, a lot of that identity comes from your job. Like when you meet someone for the first time, after 3 or 4 questions of what your name is, where you're from, what do you do?
Yeah, literally.
And people pride themselves on what they do. And I've been in situations where I'm like, oh yeah, and try and big your job up more, trying to impress people and things like that. You're like, yeah, I basically do all this. But that's not sometimes a reality. And then you feel bad. And you're like, oh shit, like I don't. And so it is such an important thing. So I do think that if people are able to work for companies that really focus on them, it's going to make such a difference.
100%. I totally agree, man. And the way things are going, I think it's becoming even like more and more important for companies to start doing that. I'm going to come back to the company side in a second. I wanted to go on a slight tangent. So you got, for the report that you guys made, Dr. Naif Al-Mutawa, I think you guys had, he was the expert that you guys had to speak on the report. And he said something about focus on what you can control. And because if you focus on things you can't control, it stresses us out, which makes sense. But he's like, the only thing we can control is the way we think. Now, I've heard this 10 million times.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, if I came and asked him, like, Tariq, okay, I understand, I can control the way I think. How do I even start to do that, to change my perspective, to change those thoughts? You know, being aware of it is one thing, but how do you actually start completely reframing that?
Well, I mean, that notion of you can only control what you think comes from, you know, the early centuries of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, and it's like the kind of the basis of Stoicism, of, you know, control what you can control. And then, you know, he would wake up in the morning and he would think that everyone's going to be horrible to him today, everyone's going to be like this, and so he'd go into the world thinking the worst can happen and try and, you know, kind of bypass all of that and have a good day. But I think I've even said this before to people, and people have taken it the wrong way. I remember a year ago or so, I said that when it was like COVID and we couldn't fly out, I was like, and the people were having issues with visas, I was like, you can only control what you can control. True. Let's not worry about that. But people still were getting, you know, agitated and annoyed by that. They were like, well, yeah, obviously that makes sense. And it's true, like you're saying now, like, yeah, of course but if it's that easy, everyone would do it.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I thought about that and I thought, okay, if it's that easy, then everyone would do it. So why aren't we doing it? And so I started like looking into that, and say there's like you say, how can you implement that and do that? I think one of the biggest things of doing it is, and I've done this quite a bit recently, is I've wrote down everything on a piece of paper of what's annoying me, what's getting me down, what I need to do, what work needs to be done, what makes me happy, you know, everything.
Yeah.
And I cross off all of the things that I can't control.
Oh, interesting.
So everything just gets crossed off. And then you're left with things that you can control, and you're like, oh, I've only got like 2 things here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'm like, okay, fine. And I'll go and do that. And, you know, you think you can control everything, but you can't control. You can only really control one thing, and that's your own thoughts. You can't even control your own health.
Yeah. You
want to try and be as healthy as possible, but something can affect you. I mean, I was ill last week. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I couldn't control that.
Yeah.
So you can't even control your own health, but you can only control the way you think. You can control. It's even hard to sometimes control your emotions. Like we say
100%.
That.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so the thoughts in our head are what we can control. And it's about, you have to work at that. You
Yeah.
have to work on that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, mind control and mind training and all these things. It's training. You need to do it every single day. And so, yeah. But I would say to that is write things down, cross everything off, and then you'll realise that there's only a few things that you can do, and then do that. Go and do it. And then if it's easy, everyone would do it. But it is easy once you see it on a piece of paper. And
Yeah. There's something about writing things down, and like even if it's I used to do this like always when I was in like my lowest points. Always, I sit in front of my computer on the keyboard, and I don't know if you've had this experience like journaling, but it wasn't really a journal. I'm writing like an essay of like the last 6 months of what's been going on and why am I here now. And I don't know if you felt the same way, like what, before I even like start typing, like I know what I'm thinking and I know what I want to say, but it's like, I used to think like once I write this, it's real. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm reading like a story and like, it's my story. I'm like, oh shit, this is actually like how I'm feeling. And I get like nervous. No one's going to see this, but it's like between me, it's like a nervousness between me and myself. It's there, you know? And when you read it back, you look at it in a, at least for me, it gave me a whole new way of looking at it. Either it definitely helped take some of the like sting out of it, whatever I was feeling. And also reading it, when you're reading something, I think you start thinking of things. You're not stuck in like a, you're not in it that you can't really see a different side. You can't feel a different way. You can't see a light at the end of the tunnel, for example. But I think what you said is a good exercise. I think it's very I think it's very interesting. I haven't done that before, but like you said, I think what I really like about that is it shows you how little you can control. Yeah. And us as people, we think we can control everything. Exactly. You know what I mean? And we doing that kind of would give you like that. Okay, that would be a nice wake up call for you to see like things aren't really how they are. There are so many things that you like when you really like go into it. There's literally like even driving here, like I could have been 30 minutes late by something I can't control, even though I left, 45 minutes early. It's silly, but there's so many things. And I think recently I've got this I've started just thinking in a different way of not only things that I can control, but just like the fragility of life as well as a whole. A friend of mine passed away, I think it was about 6 weeks ago now. And he was like the life of the party. He was like really he was always happy and he was always like joyful. You have a conversation with him, even if he was having some struggles or issues, he wouldn't ever tell you because he was just joyful. And it just made me think like I was literally talking to him about football, how Ronaldo was back at Man United, and then the next day I couldn't talk, and I was thinking like it's just insane how fragile life is. Like in a second, just like that, an illness can come and get you. And so it made me think a lot about how just you get worked up about being things you see online that affect you, or things that you can't control, and all of these things. And really, when something like that, you don't ever want that to happen to you, and you don't want to go through that. But it does take you to the point of thinking, well, yeah, you kind of do have to appreciate a lot about life, and just appreciate that we have opportunities to control what we can control, because things don't do that. And I listened to I think it was a podcast a few days ago, and this guy said, if I gave you $10 million tomorrow, but you can only live for another week, would you have it? And they were like, oh no, I wouldn't do that. And it was like, well, okay, so the most important thing for you is time, and so why are you spending a lot of it feeling this way and doing this and not trying to be the best version of yourself? And again, these are all easy things to say. It's like implementing them, which is what I struggle with, what you struggle with, I think what everyone struggles with. But there's so many like buzzwords. There's so many things that we can say to each other. Exactly. And this is why with My Wellbeing Lab, we really wanted to kind of just put all of the noise and the talk away to one side and be like, right, action. Here exactly. We are. Let's do this. Yeah. Instead of just talking about it, because we've talked a lot. I think I totally agree with that. We have talked a lot. And on the story you just mentioned about your friend, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that. And second, those events, like you said, kind of wake you up and like think, why am I upset about the guy who like cut me off? Like, why am I upset
I know,
about
yeah.
my pen that just fell, or like whatever? You know what I mean? Like being so like annoyed or frustrated by these little things in life that in the big picture don't matter. But our problem as people is this. I was saying this during like when COVID was still like super like hectic. Like, yes, now everyone's like wearing a mask, everyone's scared, whatever. But as people, like something this traumatic that's affected the whole world, people, number one, we're dumb and we forget very easily. We're like, oh, this is gone now. We can go back exactly to how life was. And somewhere down the line, something like this is gonna happen again. And this is just what happens. So, like you said, it's having that wake up moment is one thing. Does it help? Yeah, it might do. But I think it's for a short period of time, because because as life goes on, you have your family, you have your work, you have your friends, you have all the stresses, all the things that happen. You just get, sucked back into it. It's very hard to maintain that level of perspective and appreciation,
It's very difficult.
all the time. And something you said, which actually perfectly segues to my next question. So my issue personally, I want to see what you think, is like you said, we've talked about it a lot. And my issue when it comes to like mental health and personal development, there's all these buzzwords. There's a million that everyone uses. Live your fullest life, and and like all this shit. I agree with it. It's not that I don't, but also it's when you hear it so many times, I'm like, okay, come on, like guys, let's be real here. Like, let's have something that's more real. My issue with all this is a lot of people tell you what to do, like the benefits of doing this, either per personal development or mental health, but very few people tell you like how.
Yeah.
I'm telling you do this, but I'm not telling you how to do it. And I think that's one really important thing that's missing in this whole conversation. Because I can say the fancy words, but if I don't tell you how to do it, what's the point? What do you say? What's your perspective on that?
Well, that was one of the biggest things when I started doing the coaching, and I remember I was speaking to this executive coach in the US. Her name's Michelle Woodward, and she's one of the best coaches. She's amazing, and I was talking to her and I said, I'm afraid to be one of those like gurus coaches.
Exactly.
You, like do this, and then they and she was like, you see all of them, they come here, they're a flash in the pan. So there's a reason why I've been doing this for, I think she's been doing it for like 20 years, maybe more. And so like a lot of people always tell you this is how to do it, and I'm thinking, but are you doing it? Like how? Like, are you just telling us how to do it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so like the buzzwords and all of this, and we see it a lot here.
Yeah.
With not only mental health but personal development. Yeah, do this, and you'll be successful. Mm-hmm. And if you really want to be successful, then if you buy my course, then you'll definitely be successful. And I'm thinking, so you're making money from me buying the course.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's like how. So this was going through my mind all last year. Like I was thinking, right, that's what I don't want to be. This is what we want to be, and how can we do it? So then it was like, how can we show people how to do it instead of telling them? And I think my wife talked to me about this. One of her friends told her to read this book, and so we read the book and we were like, we already know this. And so I think a lot of people have now got to the stage where people know what it is. You know that you need to drink water, you know you need to eat healthy, you know that you need to have X amount of steps a day and we know this. How do we do that? And so this was one of the main pillars of My Wellbeing Lab, was to start implementing action and saying, right, tell me where you're at the moment and tell me where you want to get to, and what does your day look like? What are you doing? Yeah. And so we would when we do the coaching with people, and we do this coaching with every single employee within the company if they want it. Okay. So and we dissect their daily lives of like, right, this is where you want to be, what's happening, have you got a routine, have you got a schedule, like, and so then we will ask them questions and question them and coach them really of how to be able to implement this, because again, I don't want to tell you that you should wake up at this time. I used to, it was only like 6 years ago that I'd start work at 8:30 and I'd wake up at 7:50. So exactly. I can tell you everything, but if you're not going to do it yourself, then what's the point? So I want you to be able to come to me with that with that idea of this is what I'm going to do, because as I said, you're in control of that for the most part. So I think it's a lot about the person that you're coaching, that you're speaking to, and letting them understand. Not there's only so much advice you can give people, and they don't
100%.
want. And I think so. Recently, now I think as well, people are sick of hearing advice, and they're sick of hearing buzzwords.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be told what to do. They want to be able to do things and have that autonomy of being able to do it. So essentially, that's what we're trying to bring out of them. Like, okay, you know what to do, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you touched on a good point that I think people are sick of hearing like advice. They want something actionable, something that they can start using to, because also as people we're impatient. So like, I'm like, okay, I want to do the thing that you're telling me about, but I want to see like quick
Instant
results.
result.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's going to keep you maybe going through it.
There was did you see that Will Smith, like YouTube series that just came out?
No, I haven't.
It came out like last week, called Best Shape of My Life, because he put weight on, he said.
Okay.
And it was to lose 20 pounds in 20 weeks.
Okay.
And I loved that because it was £1 a week.
Yeah, which is
Now,
reasonable, I guess.
How many people looked at that and thought, £20 in 20 weeks, I could do that in 4 weeks. What a waste of time. Like, why is it taking you that long for? But it was like, it was just showing people that it's not all about quick results, it's about being sustainable and being able to like make them last.
Exactly.
And so like that is something as well within personal development, within mental health as well, of you don't want it just to be a flash in the pan. Here it is, you feel great. And even so we work with the American Institute of Stress, and we also work with the World Health Organization as well, for our discovery labs. And you know, one of them's of how you felt in the last 30 days, how you felt in the last 2 weeks. You need a short, significant period of time to see how you feel. But even with that time frame of like, you know, a couple of weeks feel good, a couple of weeks don't feel good.
Yeah.
It's the same with keeping things sustainable when it comes to like, you know, weight and mental health. It's that up and down.
Yeah.
It needs that consistency. So I really liked the fact that it was £20 in 20 weeks, and it was you know, 20 weeks is a long time.
Yeah.
And it kind of went against everything that you see at the moment.
Yeah.
Everyone wants quick, fast results. And I think I posted about it on LinkedIn about Glover Teixeira.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Won the title at 42 years old. You know, and we see all of these. Everyone boasts and talks about how quickly I did this, or you know, I'm the youngest person to do this. I did that myself when I was younger, and I did something which I was the youngest person to do it in a company.
Yeah.
And I look back now, I think, so what?
Yeah.
Someone's probably done it now. Like, so yeah, I think it's these it has to be long term. You have to think long term.
Yeah.
When doing something, and don't beat yourself up if you go off it for a day. You know,
yeah, of course.
If you feel down for a day, and you know you don't want to do a lot, then okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. Tomorrow we have another day. Let's go again. But don't let that keep going and keep going and keep going. Because that's when you fall into that rut.
100%. And I think that's so. I've always talked about routine, the importance of having some type of mental health routine that you do every day, specifically for what you just said. And I always say, I've posted on LinkedIn about like, guys, this is a routine I have, but sometimes like there's been months that I haven't done it. Like, but I have something to fall back on. But usually sometimes in my experience, it's come when I haven't been on it for a while. I get to a certain place and then I'll be like, why am I feeling this way? I'm like, okay, it's my mental health. I haven't been taking care of it. So I always say the importance of routine is because it's always going to be up and downs. No matter what you're doing in your life, weight, work, love, everything's up and down. There's nothing that's just a straight, you know, consistent line. So I think having that routine makes the highs even higher and doesn't make the lows so bad. It's like that foundation level that everything's just gonna bounce off.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think like you say, everything's going to be up and down, but what you can keep constant is your actions.
Yeah.
Throughout.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something. Even I've struggled with that. Like I do things in spurts. So like a couple of weeks I'll be on it and I'll do everything that you know meditate, journal. You're supposed to do all these things. I'll do it and then I'll fall off for a week and then I'll go back and so it's sometimes it's about keeping that consistency, and I've struggled with that in the past, and but now it's regimented of like, right, this is what's going to happen at this time, this is what time I'm waking up, you know, this is what time I'm going to jiu-jitsu, and this is what time this is happening. So all of these things are in place, and I think by having these conversations with companies and speaking to them as well, you do see that people, not all of the people who are in the higher positions, in the management leadership positions, but a lot of them do have some sort of routine set up, and some don't. But the ones who don't, you can see that even if they haven't got something that they could tell you, like, this is what time I do this, there's something behind.
There's some organization kind of
madness,
thing. Yeah, exactly.
So I do think it does help a lot. But it's trying to keep that level of consistency throughout. And again, like you said, talked about like buzzwords and different things. There's so many different things to do.
Yeah.
So you can get overwhelmed with
100%.
With like, okay, so I woke up at 6 and then I meditated, then I journaled, then I did some breath work, then I did this, and did that, and then it's like you start work and you've done everything, and it becomes a bit. It becomes like too much. You're like, okay, now what else can I do? And you start craving those new things. So there's so many different things. So I think it's about what works for you overall.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you can get overwhelmed by how many things there are, and I always say, I'm like, listen, keep it as simple as possible. Even if it's start with one thing, see how you feel, adjust. It's even now like it's trial and error, and it's always going to be trial and error. You might do this for like a couple months. You're like, okay, maybe this isn't working for me anymore. Maybe I need something new. I need to add something. Maybe I need to remove something. So find what works for you. But the most important thing is you want to keep it simple, something easy, something you're happy to do. Because I've had this experience. If you give me when I start putting a list of things to do that I genuinely want to do, if it starts becoming a task, then something just like spur of the moment that like, oh, I'm doing it and I'm happy doing it, I start getting like, maybe, I'm not in the mood to do that. Even though I genuinely want to, but now in my mind, it shifted to something that I have to do instead of something, I want to do. And the whole point of routine, why I think it's important is, like you said, the consistency, but the routine is the stepping stone, because all you want it to do is become a habit. Once it's a habit, it's a lot easier to do, because it becomes that thing, if you've been working out for years consistently, you don't go to the gym for like a week or a couple of days, there's that guilt that's going to start building up, and you're like, oh, okay, all right, I need to get my ass back in the gym or whatever. So once it gets to that level, I think it's easier to maintain, but you still will go off. It's normal. And I wanted to ask you about, so the thing about mental health is, I think, unlike a physical injury, I can see, I can feel that pain. It's instant, I get that quick feedback that tells me there's something wrong in my body. With mental health, it's very sneaky. You don't, and a lot of times, myself included, you don't realize you're not in a good place until it's too late. It starts with one thing and then just progresses over time. You start being less motivated, less productive, can't sleep well, you're not working. Like, it affects all areas of your life, both obviously mentally and physically. So I think that's the biggest challenge when it comes to mental health. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of, if I was trying to ask you, how would you explain the progression of let's say your mental health falling off? How would you describe that? Do you have a story maybe you could tell us about how, like, something that's happened to you or something that,
Yeah, I mean, we did some work with a company in DIFC, and one of the we spoke with one of the girls there, and she actually was talking to us generally just how she felt, and she was saying, this is how I feel like before I have to come to work, and this is how I just feel generally. And I was like, and she's like, yeah, but everyone feels like this, right? This is normal. And I was like, no, this is like not normal. I think we've normalized like the feelings of anxiety and the feelings of just general anxiety as like, or the fear, and we've normalized it, and we've added like, some even comedic value to it, like with all these memes and things like that. And so it can creep on you because you think, well, everyone else is feeling like this. This is just how people feel. Before you know it, you kind of hit that point, and she definitely hit that point of where, like, I now need to maybe go and see somebody because I've realised that this isn't a normal thing. And to go in and have that conversation. So I think in terms of how what we do is we try and make sure that you never have to get to that point.
Exactly. It's prevention.
Yeah. By having these conversations and by talking to people and letting them understand that, right, this is how you're feeling at the moment. If you continue in the same way, this is what's going to happen. And it's so easy to not see the signs.
Yeah.
I even looking at myself, like, just, it's hard to even look at it now and think back, because it's like, how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly.
How was it able to get to that point? Even with the things that I knew, understanding that all of these different things about mental health, it creeps up on you out of nowhere.
Exactly.
And we've seen this with so many other people that we've worked with. It's crept up on them, and you just don't want to get to that breaking point. But how can you see the signs? I think one of the big things is communication with people around you. That's so important.
Like your support group.
Yeah, you need that support group
for sure.
And even then, sometimes it's like getting them to understand as well, making sure that they're aware of right, these are the signs. So it's hard. Like, you can explain to your friends, sometimes they may not know. But it's one of the things. It's very hard to pick up on yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no like, if this is happening to you, then this is mental health. It's because it may not be, but it may well be as well. You might stay in bed for a few days and might not want to get out of bed, but that, is that mental health, or are you just feeling a bit sick under the weather, or just not feeling up to it? It's how long has that gone on for, and all of these things. So it's a very tough thing to find out unless you speak to someone about it. And that's why one of the big things that we're doing is like just trying to have conversations with every single person within a company. Yeah. And speaking to them and seeing, because we can see the signs, and the coaches that we have, they see the signs, and so they'll have these conversations and they'll say, look, we're going to refer you. We have like partners in Dubai Healthcare City. We're going to refer you to there. Go and speak to them, who are like clinical psychologists. Yeah, yeah. Or if it's something that the coaches can coach, okay, we're going to come up with a plan. Yeah. Because there's, like you say, it crept up on you. It's crept up on me. Yeah, it creeps up on everyone. I wish I could give you an answer of this is how this is the way to fix it, but I couldn't say. Yeah. This is what you can do, because it is a tough one. Yeah, no, it is a tough one. But I think two things that you said stood out is, I think communication, even just speaking to, like your support group, which means the people around you who you trust, who love you and so on, about maybe if you're not feeling too good, whatever, maybe they'll help get you perspective. Maybe they'll notice something. So I think communication is important. And two, it's very, like you said, it is very difficult for ourselves personally to catch ourselves when we're in a bad place or before we get to a really, really bad place. So having maybe more education personally and for the people around you on these are the signs to look out for, guys. If you see me, not being very reactive, not in the best mood, like maybe check on me, like ask me like what's going on, and maybe that will, spark that thing. There's that's a good point. I think as well, from I've had like coaching sessions, but also by seeing a therapist as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some of our coaches, they've kind of gone through like CBT and they've understood that. But by going through that process, I've been educated myself on catching the signs now personally. I'm sure. And so, if I ever feel a bit down, I'm like, right, okay, why? And then I start coaching myself, questioning myself. And that has helped a lot. And so if it wasn't for the coach and if it wasn't for seeing a therapist, I definitely wouldn't been able to manage some of the feelings that have happened, in this year. So that has been a huge change. Yeah. And so education, not only educating your friends, like you said, but educating yourself and understanding that feeling and, like you say, managing emotions and controlling that. Like, sometimes we can't, but we need to learn how to try and control them. Yeah. And what's the difference is like, it's such a, like, different emotions when it comes to like mental health is such a complex thing that we don't ever think to learn about why we feel certain ways that we feel. Like, why do we feel really happy when we hear good news and really sad when we hear bad news. Like, we know, because on the surface level, what's under that? Like, what are the reasons behind this?
Yeah.
I do think that is something that overall we definitely need to start learning. It's taken me a long time to learn it, and I've got a long way to go, but even just the bit of information that I've got has helped me. So I think that's definitely something that could help others.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I totally agree. And like you said, I think one of the issues is, because I'm going to get on to this next question. So I think one of the issues is that when we're talking about emotions, number one, like, think of how you grew up. Was there ever a class in school or in university, for that matter, is like, oh, these are emotions. This is how you feel. This is what it impacts. This nothing. Like, this is all, okay, maybe there's been literature about it there, I'm sure, from like psychologists and stuff in the past, but only last maybe 10 years has it started becoming like to the forefront, and a lot of people are starting to talk about it. That's why you hear it, mental health, for example, like all over the place now. And I think there's us not being taught how to do that. That should be like a life skill that you're like taught, like that. And for example, like sales as well, like these two skills that you're going to use for life that are always going to help you. One thing you said on your website is due to a lack of education, there's still a stigma surrounding mental health in the region. Okay. So before I ask my question, this is my perspective. I think, like kind of like we talked about what we said earlier, everyone has talked about mental health by now. I think the education is out there. So I believe if you still have a stigma about mental health, is two things. Number one, you're not taking the time to actually go and learn and read yourself and educate yourself about what is mental health. And two, I think that you're living in, you have this perspective that like, oh yeah, this is I'm not a person that's ever affected by mental health. My mental health could never be affected, And I know lots of people, and culture plays a big part into that.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, I get that. I 100% get that. So I don't know, like, I think if there's still a stigma, you're choosing to keep the stigma. I don't think there's a lack of education anymore, but I wanted to ask you, based on what you're talking about, what education in particular is missing in your opinion?
Like I said at the start, we've heard the stories now, so we know about it, and we've heard about it, and so it's got to that point of like, yeah, okay, we know. But I would say the lack of education now is in the action.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so we know about mental health, so what we're going to do about it? But we don't seem to get anywhere with that. I think we just talk a lot.
Yeah.
And I think there's companies that tick a box, and they'll have the conversation with me or the other co-founder or some people in our team, and okay, we talked about mental health today, tick, and then and then that's it. And it gets to a stage of thinking, okay, but what are we doing? And so when I talk about lack of education, I think it's the lack of education around how to action things.
The how.
And the how.
Yeah, how, exactly.
Because we know the why. Everyone knows the why now.
Exactly.
And so, we can talk about all of this, but it's not getting anywhere. It's like that person who always says they're going to go to the gym and they're going to be this and that, and they never go to the gym. And I'm pretty much talking about myself, but I'm going to get in shape this year. Okay, but how are you going to do it? This is how I'm going to do it. Okay, so do it then. And so we're at that point now, and it's interesting you say about like the culture side of things. It's funny because so my dad's from India, but he moved to the UK when he was like late 20s. And my mum was from Pakistan, but she moved to the UK when she was like 2 years old.
Okay.
Brought up in like a Muslim household. And when I talked about mental health, they'd be like, I'd go and pray. I'd go and pray, and then I'd feel good for a couple of minutes, and the next day I'd still feel the same. Yeah. And I think that's the culture of that, of go and pray, I'm going to do this. It definitely can have it definitely can help, because prayer is meditation at the end of the day. And that's definitely one of the pillars of good mental health. However, within the culture of where we are in this region, it's the second point you said of mental health doesn't affect me. I'm too strong for that. It's like when my friends when we talk about jiu-jitsu, like jiu-jitsu wouldn't work on me. If I was in a fight, I would just go crazy. It wouldn't work, and you just think you're crazy. 'Cause
Yeah.
But no, that wouldn't work on me.
For sure.
And so when we have these coaching sessions about mental health, and so we there's two ways of how we do it. We do talent development.
Okay.
And we do mental health. So when we're coaching people, we can talk about, for example, if you were in the coaching lab, do you want to? We'll talk about you, and we'll find out what you want to do. And it might be that you've got ambitions to be better at work, you've got ambitions to own your own business or whatever. And the coaches will coach you on that, and because there's two sides of it: executive coaching and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people that have come into this process who are part of this culture and my culture and your culture, who outside of a coaching session would say mental health doesn't affect them, then they come in and they spend 50 minutes talking about their mental health. That was the point where it's like, okay, I think we've gamed the system here. We're getting people to talk about their mental health through coaching, and they're opening up.
Yeah.
And so like that is a big part of it, and that's what's really kind of changed a lot within that. But back to the first point of the education, it is definitely how we've had I mean, I don't know how many companies we've spoken to, over 100 this year, within the region, and some have been very actionable and said, yes, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it, and some have said, we really want to do it, and then it fizzles out and it goes, and it's like, okay, so what are you doing now then? Oh, we had a conversation about it in February, but what's happening now?
Yeah.
And so I think this is the major thing, and this
Gotcha.
is the biggest issue with it. It's more the action of how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the lack of education now.
Yeah.
Because like I said, people know what's happening, and people know the conversation, they know the stories, they know there's so many stories that they've been there and they've heard it all. So now it's time to do it. And I think there's, we had emails of people saying next year's our plan to really focus on this. How can we do it? And it's like, this is how we do it, and this is what works. And yeah.
Yeah, I think you made a good point that I would agree with you that the lack of education is definitely on the how, for sure. And I think more than that, listening to you is about your, like, I guess the cultural desire from like a corporate side and maybe personal side to be like, okay, now you told me the how, but it's like, am I gonna meditate for like, just like one day, like, oh yeah, I meditated, I've taken like that box ticking thing. I think that's the biggest challenge probably, is not only now if we've educated you on the how, is are you gonna do it? Mm-hmm. Are you gonna be consistent with it, or is it something you're doing to make yourself feel better for that like couple that day and so on? So
I think as well, like we have to look at the region that we're in, and it's such a unique region, and this city is amazing, and it provides so many things in so many ways, but also it's, for something like mental health, it's hard for companies sometimes to put a focus on it because they don't have to. And so if we're really going to be open and honest about things, they don't have to focus on mental health here.
No,
because okay, these are some of the things that we hear. It's like, well, it's in their health insurance, they can go and see somebody. How hard is it for someone to even tell their friends about how they're feeling, let alone pick up a phone, then go to see a therapist, and then pay 850 dirhams out of their pocket, then claim it back and be like, oh, hi, HR, I had to go and see a therapist. There's so many different steps that it's like when you go to the shop and you buy some trainers, the salesperson takes the trainers right to the desk, so you don't have to think about do I need these? Do I need these?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with this. Of I'm about to get into the car, go to this. Do I really need to? No, I'm fine. I'm going to book it. Do I need to? No, I'm okay.
Yeah.
So there's loads of different ways. So that's the first one of hearing that. I think the other one is that, well, they don't need to, because so many people want to work here. So many people want to work in Dubai. And so we'll offer you this. This is what you get.
You don't like it?
You don't like it? You can go. But you need your job. Because then if I don't have a job, then I don't have a visa, then I've got to go home, back to the UK.
Yeah, also true.
And so, again, we can get away with it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so why do I, if, sometimes I put myself in the shoes of these big corporations or some of these companies that have basically just said, we're not interested. And I think to myself, well, you don't have to be, really, do you? Because what's the gain of you spending money on this? And yes, we can tell them that bottom line will increase overall, and there's facts and figures behind this.
Yeah.
But if you're not interested, like, how can we turn that around?
Exactly.
And so, like, what's great happening now is that people are actually leaving their jobs because of this. Here in this region. And we're seeing that now, and the people are starting to wake up. But in terms of, like, compared to, like, the UK and the US, of how people can easily just leave a job and go somewhere, I don't know if we'll ever be able to fully
get to that
stage. And so when it comes to mental health in organisations, when we look at the bigger companies, it's good in a way because they can take aspects, and they have budgets, they're able to introduce things in, because they've looked at what Europe's doing, what America's doing, and they say, okay, we're going to do this. But when it comes to the smaller companies as well, the startups, some, like I say, are really happy to introduce that, and then others are like, well, no, we don't need to do that.
We don't need to do that, yeah.
So it's, if we're being completely honest, it's very tough here because of how it is set up, and so I don't know what is going to change that. Yeah. And that's something to think about.
No, 100%. And I think you touched on a good point about as, like, let's say if I'm a big corporation, like, okay, what, like, even if it does give me the bottom line and everything you're saying, like, when I think also it's the time factor. They're like, okay, when am I gonna get this, like, 4x in productivity by spending, I heard a statistic that every dollar spent on mental well-being or, like, mental health at a company returns $4 in productivity. It's from the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
So I'm not making this out of my ass, guys. And so even with all the sometimes you can have all the numbers, all the information, all the data, there's nothing. The only cost to you is the financial cost. But there's so many benefits that you're going to get, not just, from a financial perspective, but from a company perspective, productivity, all that stuff. So I had someone on the podcast recently, and he's an expert in sustainability and sustainable transformation. And he works with companies to help them become more sustainable and how they grow and their strategy and so on. So I asked him, I'm like, what do you do if there's a company that, like, is your job, like, is your job to, what if I'm trying to sell to a company kind of like what you would do with mental health that isn't really interested, doesn't believe in it, and so on. And he said something that really stuck with me, and it's kind of what I do even with therapy, is that he's like, Khaled, I made a decision that it's not my job to convince you. I'm only going to work with people or companies that understand this and believe in this, and together we can be successful. Same thing with me with therapy. That's why I always have a call before with a client, because I'm also deciding, I'm like, do I think you'd be a successful client? Do I think I'm the right person to help you? Sometimes I turn clients away and like, guys, I'm not the right one. So as mental health professionals, is it our job? It feels like it is our job to, like, try to convince you that, to do this, or should we just shift focus and just focus on the people and the companies that actually understand what we're doing and believe in it?
I think that's what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
I think everyone is I don't think people are having those hard conversations with companies. I think everyone is working with people that they want to work with, are happy to and open to it. But when we talk about companies, we think of, like, we don't think of it as there's one or two individuals that are making the decision for up to 100,000 or 1,000 people. So when it comes to, like, having that tough conversation, I'm very happy to have it, because, okay, you two people might not need it, but there's 1,000 people that may be affected by your decision here.
Yeah.
And so that's the most important thing for me. So if they're like, no, we don't need this, and no, everyone's okay, and this and that, this is why we did the Discovery Lab.
Yeah.
And it was to show them and give them the scores of what they're getting back. And we don't charge for the Discovery Lab. It's never been something that we've made money off.
So is it like a questionnaire kind of thing?
Similar to that. It's
Okay.
It's more of an assessment. And what happens is you'll get 3 percentage scores back on your company's well-being score, their stress score, and their productivity score.
Okay, interesting. Interesting.
and then they'll see that, okay, 72% of our staff are stressed, and then I'll say to them, well, you said to me when our first meeting that everyone's happy here, and so it's a great tool for people to do that who may say, oh no, we're not interested in this, because it's able to show them, actually, here's facts and figures, not just from a report on the UAE workforce. This is yours, people.
Exactly.
This is how people are doing for you. And here's these scores compared to everyone else's as well.
Yeah.
Like the industry average. And so I'm more inclined to go and speak to the people who are saying no.
Interesting. Okay.
Because there's all the people that have said yes, they're pretty much, there's loads of companies who are doing mental health stuff. So we're going to offer you something different. Like, this is why we did like the coaching labs, and this is why we focus a lot on, we don't do webinars, we don't really do workshops that much unless there's a real focus, because there's 10 companies you can go for that.
Yeah.
But innovation is key here. And so we were looking at things that were working, and we were looking at things that weren't working. And we went to the thing that focused on the thing that wasn't working.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's having that conversation with people that don't want to do it. I think that's more important. You're talking about therapy, one-on-one, 100%.
Yeah.
And definitely. But when it's a company, it's not one-on-one.
That's a good point.
There's 100, 200, 300, 1,000 people that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
And so this is why when I talk about people saying, oh, we don't need it, or there's no need for it, that frustration is there from my side, because it's like, it's not you. It's not you as an individual. There's all of these people that are working for you. How do you know how Tariq, who's sitting at a desk, feels?
Yeah.
How do you know how Khalid is, who's worked 6 days a week and is working on the weekend and he's staying up till 10 o'clock at night? You don't know this.
Yeah.
And if we were able to speak to these people, coach them, help them understand, help them, breathe a bit, then that's going to affect them. And yeah, your company might feel better, but there needs to be more of a focus on just individuals. I think people are selfish now. Everything's about how is things going to affect me?
Yeah.
And not look about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about let's all hold hands and skip to work.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be a focus on other people, and how our decisions can affect their day-to-day lives. Like, we don't think deep enough when it comes to this. Like, how you speak to somebody at work could affect how that person goes home and speaks to his wife and his kids.
Of course, yeah, 100%.
And so, why are we not? Like, and then kids grow up in a certain environment because dad's stressed at work. Like, come on, you don't like. This is bigger than we don't need mental health. This is bigger than our company doesn't really need it. This could affect so many. The trickle down effect is so big.
Exactly.
That and so this is why we're going after the people that say no.
Okay, I respect that. I guess I understand the difference between, for example, the work I do and the work you're doing, and that there's more people involved, so it's not just about a one-on-one kind of thing. And I think the data, showing the data, is always very useful, because that's a wake-up call. I think it's interesting that you want to convince the people who say no. I think it's probably more challenging, but definitely I can imagine it's much more rewarding when it does work out too. I guess the thing is, this is another layer and maybe a deeper thing. And you are right, mental health, like this, everything's connected. Like your mental health affects every area of life. Your work does. Like, it affects your relationships, your work, your love, every single thing. So, like you said, it's bigger than what we don't need mental health. It's bigger than all this. But what if now I'm a company, I'm like, okay, yeah, thanks for the data, Tariq, I appreciate it, but I don't care.
Yeah, that's happened.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
That's happened. It's happened recently.
Yeah.
Thanks, but yeah, we're okay. And at that point, you start thinking, okay, well, I've used
That's
this.
just sad, though.
It is. And at that point, I call them up and I just have a conversation with them. I said, forget about the company. Forget about who you work for. Let's just talk as people.
Yeah.
and let's just, I don't care if you want to purchase this or you don't want to purchase this, but I just want to talk to you and understand why are you using these sort of words and using this way of thinking. Is it something from above that's happening that's telling you this, or what is it? And so when you start speaking to them about this, you find out they're struggling too.
Yeah.
And so like then you understand it. Oh yeah, I can't. My boss is saying this. Or even we did it with a person who's a CEO of a company. He's like, Tariq, I'm under so much pressure, so much stress that I can't afford to do this at the moment. And I remember once there was a company out here, and I said we did the Discovery Lab, and I said there's three reasons. There's really three reasons why people won't ever do anything with our company, and it's one is because of budgets. And if that's the case, then look, we'll figure something out and we'll help. Two, it's because of lack of education of how to do it, and again we'll help you with that. And the third one is because, as brutal as it sounds, it's because you just don't care. And if that's the case, then we need to have a conversation on that. And so what we did was I checked in with them, once every couple of weeks, and just had a chat with them, and basically just coached the leadership team for free, nothing. Just had a chat with them because I wanted them to understand the benefits of how, because they had so many employees, and I knew people that worked at the company.
Okay,
I knew that they.
So you knew both sides of the kind
I knew
of the
both
story.
sides.
Yeah.
I knew how they felt as well at times, and then eventually after doing that, it took like 3 or 4 months. We started doing some work with them.
Okay.
And so, not everyone is in a position to be able to do that.
True.
With everybody, but
True.
It was just something that I knew that could help them. But yeah, you do get that. They some people will take it and then be like, okay, we're not interested. What can you do?
Yeah, there you go. What can you do?
do?
Yeah, I think that's where that's where the convincing stops.
Yeah.
Because you have everything. I've tried, to show you the benefits, but I really respect what you do. That if it gets to that point and if they genuinely don't care, you still want to have a conversation with them.
Yeah,
to
that's
understand.
when
I think, and I respect, because I don't think many people do that. I don't even know if I would do that.
That's when the co-founder or anything from business, we just put that away. Okay, fine, forget it. But let's just have a conversation.
What's up?
anyway.
Yeah, what's going on?
Because if how are you feeling? Forget everything else.
Yeah.
I think it's just important because people are. So I remember once I had a meeting scheduled with somebody, and she messaged me and she said, "Can I postpone the meeting till?" It was on Thursday. She's like, "Can I postpone it till Sunday? My mental health isn't very good." I was thinking, this is perfect.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
keep postponing until it is fine.
Yeah, 100%.
And I was like, it's crazy how some people are so open and honest.
Yeah.
And then some people are just on the opposite
Closed
end.
book. Yeah,
and it's
a spectrum.
It is insane how big the spectrum really is.
Yeah.
And it's as well, like, you said you were in sales before. I don't know what were you selling?
Like tech.
Yeah.
Tech startups.
And I've done I used to sell like an event.
Like SaaS platforms.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
And then so I used to sell like exhibition stands at
Okay.
events.
Yeah.
So the event was on this date, and you needed to book your stand by X date to be at the event.
Yeah.
When you're doing something like this and within mental health and you're talking to people, when do you start it? When do you really need it? And things can get just pushed on and pushed on and pushed on. And so it doesn't matter even if you're the best salesperson in the world or if you convince the people that you can't convince and you convince the people that who don't need convincing. Sometimes it's like it's then working with the elements of when can we actually implement this and do that. So there's so many different things that can come up.
Yeah.
It's challenging, but it's something that, I mean, based on what we've done, we've coached. We've done over 150, 200 hours of coaching.
Wow. Okay. Awesome.
So that in itself, that's people that have benefited from this.
Yeah.
And then through the Discovery Labs and just having these different conversations, we've done hundreds of them. So again, that there's a benefit there. There's that trickle down effect.
Yeah.
And we hope to keep doing that.
Yeah. No, and congrats on that, man. That's awesome to have done that much work and help. I can imagine it's been very beneficial to people. I think hearing you talk about the trickle down effect, I think another issue when it comes to this space is like you said, there's so many moving elements. There's a huge spectrum, and even if I could identify where you are on the spectrum, then I have to look at like your history as a human to understand why you're here and why you're there. So it's an incredibly complex problem, both as on an individual basis, like just from Khaled and Tariq, for example, on person to person. Then trying to take that into like a company that runs in a certain way, and there's people, and this guy run. It's a very big. It's not a simple thing, and I think a lot of times we try to make it simple. I think we try to make it simple to make it relatable, to make me, more interested in trying it and doing it. But learning what I've really taken from our conversation today, and maybe something that I didn't take into account enough, is the complexity of this issue.
Yeah. I think that it's very true what you say. Like, think about how different every single person is, how different our thoughts are. I was thinking about this a few days ago, of like how like complex our minds are, and we think in a certain way. We have our own opinions, we have our own thoughts, and sometimes it's like we're really like stubborn of how we think, and we can't change it. Like, you can't tell me that Cristiano Ronaldo is not Lionel Messi is better than Cristiano Ronaldo. You can't tell me that.
Yeah. I'm
not listening to it. Right, Cristiano Ronaldo is the best ever. And I'm not changing that thought, and we'll fall out.
Yeah. For sure.
But so, and even on a silly thing like that, like so complex, and like people talk about things.
Yeah.
So then, it amazes me sometimes how like we coexist with people. Like we get married with people who are also this complex, and we find that way. And then if you think about it, when we're doing that with companies, and there's 100, 200 people, think about how complex you are as an individual.
Yeah.
Everyone listening, think about how complex your life has been. How you think, how rational your thoughts are, how unrational your thoughts are. Then think of 200 other people like that, put into this building where one or two people at the top say, right, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
All of you people, let's try and figure a way of how to do this work forward so we can all make money. Yeah, I mean, it's when you start looking at it like that, you're like, well, how do businesses even work?
Yeah, exactly.
Think, like, how does it work? So I think from a mental health point of view, it's about being open.
Yeah.
And I think we as individuals as well, just be open to learning, open to, try new methods that are going to help our mental health. For companies as well, you don't have to just try. Sometimes the way that we do things might not work. Maybe there's another company that do things and that really works for you. Like, try loads of the different things. You don't have to do this. Like, for example, like all the companies in the UAE just have like employee assistance programs. You have like a 0.1% uptake in them. Like, no one's using employee assistance programs now. Like, it's just they were created in the 1930s to curb alcoholism. And then it was, and then it only was until the 80s where other employee benefits started.
Like being included in that.
Yeah, then it was like, paid leave and all of this lot. And so, like I say, like, innovation is so important. We're using things that are from like nearly 100 years ago still to try and tackle something which is very much
today a present issue. A
present issue. Like, people say, if you look back at mental health and the trend of it being more prevalent, is it because of how complex our lives are now? Is it because we're opening up more? I think it's definitely both.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we need to now do things that are from today's age, that are going to help the people in today's age.
100%.
But there's so many different things. Go and try things. Go and have a look. Go and see what works for your people. Include them in the process. I think this is really important to include them in that. Have that conversation. Open it up and see what works for them and what doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And there's one of the things within the Discovery Lab as well. We find out all of these questions, so then we can go to the team and say, look, this is what they would really benefit from.
Yeah.
So you don't have to guess. Like, I feel sorry for all of these HR people that we speak to, and they said, we got in touch with you because we've been told that we need to do a workshop on stress management. I'm like, okay, well, why? Who told you that? Our boss has told us. But so you're going to pay us now. You're going to pay me money to do that. I just say no.
Yeah.
I just say, look, let's take a step backwards first. And sometimes from a business point of view, it's probably not the most wise thing to do.
Yeah.
But I can, take money off you now, and then it might work, it might not, or I can make an impact, and something actually, we might find that, for example, there was a company, over 300 employees, 45.4% suffered from body and self-image issues.
Oh, wow.
45.4%.
That's
huge.
Huge, yeah.
Who's having that conversation? No one's talking about that.
Yeah.
No one's having that conversation when they're eating lunch or having a cigarette. No one's talking about that. But we found that out through that, and then we were like, okay, right. If you want to do a workshop, you got to do a workshop on this, not stress management or financial stability.
Yeah.
This is what we need to focus on right now. We can focus on that down the line.
Yeah.
But let's focus on this because this is a big number.
Yeah. So
that's kind of taking it back and doing that. So I think that's an important.
I think what I've learned from our conversation today and from you is not just the difference between, I guess, there's like impact and profit. Like you just said, sometimes it can be, maybe not the best thing for the business, but I think what I've taken from you, Tariq, is intention, the why. Like, why do you want to do this workshop? Like, what, what's it's not just like, oh, my boss told me to do this. Okay, but like, why? What's the benefit you're trying to get from this? I think that needs to be very clear, because if it's just an order and you just, following the process, and yes, you could give them the workshop. But I've also personally, I'm not a big fan of workshops. I think, it's...
I really don't like them at all.
It's how much am I going to help you, relieve your stress with, 1 hour? Okay, you do this, you do that.
It's just talking.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just hearing someone's story again.
Exactly.
It's not a benefit.
I don't think that's going to create change, in the short term or in the long term. It needs to be kind of like what you guys do. Coaching, it's going to take time, and it needs to be and it needs that time, though, because people need time to change how they think, to be coached, to do all these things. What I really liked about the Discovery Lab is your concept of gathering data, and not just gathering data about generally, but gathering data about the company. Now, I started to think I've been last year done a lot of research into mental health, trying to get statistics and data from the region, and I realized there isn't much. It's very hard to find data relating to mental health and something very specific, whether it's in the UAE or in the region. But I think nowadays, you're starting to find more data is starting to come out. And do you think the lack of data in the past wasn't because it wasn't top of mind, but now since COVID has happened in the region, everyone's kind of woken up and be like, oh, this is something we need to address?
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I don't think it was at front of mind before, because like I said before, it doesn't need to be front of mind now. So imagine then, it was definitely nothing to even consider. So I think now, because of COVID, it's definitely helped bring that to the attention of, okay, let's focus on this and let's understand where people are at. What my hopes are is that it doesn't just trickle away and fall away.
Yeah.
And that, okay, we get a couple of reports and we do this, and then after a while we're back to where we were, because like you say, it's like you said at the start, you do things, then we kind of fall back into our way of doing things how we did it before, because that was always the way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there are reports and there are some new ones, but again, back to that point, we can read the reports, but what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I did when that Cigna report came out, I think it was 68% of employees, or maybe it was higher, that not happy in their job. That, when I think of that, I don't think of them at work. I think of them outside of work, at home.
How they're feeling at
home.
Yeah.
Because I've been in jobs before where I've not really liked the job.
Yeah, same here.
And how I felt at home, I used to live in the marina. I just walk around the marina after work, depressed, oh my God, what am I going to do? How I felt then, I don't want people to feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at work, I was happy as Larry, having a laugh and joke with my friends, because it's even if you're around friends and things like that, you can kind of just get through your day.
Yeah.
You're just blindly getting through your day.
Yeah.
It's how you are outside of work, and that dread of going back to work and thinking, I've got a okay, it's 7 o'clock now, I've got to be in bed by 10, and I've got 3 hours, and like you start calculating life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the issue. So when one of the big things that we do is that when I'm speaking to companies, I'm not even thinking about how they are at work. I'm thinking about how their life is and how they're just generally feeling.
Yeah.
And I hope that these reports do shed light to that as well.
Yeah,
It's something
exactly.
that we want to do too,
Yeah.
as our Discovery Lab evolves, is to, we do talk about well-being, we talk about the stress, we talk about productivity at work. There's definitely going to be a part of maybe more of social, psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel outside of work, knowing that work's going good,
Yeah.
or if it's not going so good? How is that affecting you day to day? Are you single? Are you in a relationship? Are you a parent? Does that affect your children?
Yeah.
That's a big thing. I've got a daughter who's like 2.5 years old. Not enjoying a job before affected me at home, which affects her.
Yeah.
So now that's a problem.
Of course. Yeah.
Because before it was just me, but now if it's affecting her life, then now it's something, and then I don't know, maybe definitely being a parent maybe makes you more softer. I mean, I'm soft as hell, but I start thinking about, your mind starts going, you think, okay, what about all these people in companies who've got kids?
Yeah.
And so
just extrapolate from there. Yeah.
And so that why of really wanting to make the impact, sometimes it goes way down the line of like,
of course,
helping someone out like who's a child. But
yeah,
I do hope that reports make a difference, and I do think that there'll be a lot more reports.
Yeah, for sure.
And what I want to see from these reports is not that 68% of people hate their jobs, is that with 68% of companies have done something in the last 12 months for mental health. 50% of companies who have done something have found that this is what's worked and this is what's helped. That's what we need. We never get reports on that. And that's just not just here, that's across the world.
Yeah.
Like, rarely do we get reports on that. We just get the doom and gloom reports.
Yeah.
I want a happy report in the next 12 months, and we'll do it ourselves. We'll do the report based on this is what's worked and this is what's helped. Here's some tools that are going to help you move forward.
Exactly. So
instead of that doom and gloom of, we all hate our jobs. I think we all knew that.
Yeah, exactly.
But thanks for confirming it.
Yeah, so not just reports about the state of how things are, a report about we understood where we were, we tried some things, these were the benefits and the data that has come as a result of that. Like what has worked and stuff. No, I get that.
And then just move on from there, and then try again, try the next one. Okay, exactly. If that's worked, did it continue working for a few years, or was it just a year thing?
Yeah.
It needs to be constant. We need to.
It's an iterative process. It has to constantly being updated and modified and so on. I've got a few more questions for you, Tariq, and these are two I've been leaving to the end because they're I think the big ones.
Right.
So everything we've talked about today about mental health, about the tools, about the education, about the culture, about the mindset, about all these things. Like, we've talked about a lot of things. And now, as you know, being in the space, there's a lot of push towards mental health and like trying to improve it and so on. I read an article in Arabian Business a few months ago, and it said 93% of people experienced being always on. And the UAE, I think, I don't know about other countries in the region, but I'm gonna just talk about the UAE. And from what I hear and see from like all my friends, this always on culture. Being expected, working on weekends, working overtime, finishing at 10 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. every night, and then waking up the next day and doing it again. And I did some research, and the UAE's global averages in anxiety, depression, burnout, and family issues are higher than the global average across the board on all those four.
Wow.
And so I'm like, all the things we're talking about and the work you're doing, the work I do, the work we're all doing is all good. But are we just putting Band-Aids on the problem? Because I think until what we're doing it does help, but I see it as we're putting Band-Aids, we're trying to make the problem a little bit better for you. But until the culture, and that has to come from government and so on, like the culture surrounding like this always on changes. Are we just, up against, are we just at the end of the day is just going to be like for nothing. And I just read something yesterday that Portugal, I don't know if you read it, has made it illegal for your employer to message you after work. Illegal.
Yeah, good.
You know, exactly. That's fantastic. But so that's why when I read that, I'm like, yes, that's what we need, because if it just continues like this, if there's no one that's going to put a stop to this, like if there's no boundaries that are being set, if people are never getting the time, if you're always stressed, you're always working, getting an email at like 10 p.m. on a Friday night and like, oh yeah, now you have to just like,
yeah,
it's not life. And it really frustrates me. This is like one of my biggest things, and it makes me sad. So I don't know. What do you think? I think it's all positive that we're doing. But from what I've seen and from what I've heard, I feel like maybe we're just putting a band-aid on the problem.
No, there's not many things that I dislike in the world, but this hustle mentality is something I really don't like. When you were kids, when we were all kids, and we wanted to, and we talked about like life, and we were like, okay, what we go? You wanted to get the most for doing the least, right?
Yeah.
And so now, if you see a person who owns a business, who's managed to get the most of their time, they still work 24 hours a day and they do this, and then because you have to. And you know, a friend of mine, he owns an exhibition company, and he used to tell me, like, when I first owned my own business, I'd be like, right, I own my own business now, so I need to go and work all the hours in the day. I need to get up at 5 o'clock, send an email at 5:05, like do all of this stuff, and work until 12 o'clock at night. And then he switched that focus and he said, you know what, I'm going to get up at this time, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to work until this time, then I'm going to relax, and that's it. And he's in a position to be able to do that because he owns his own business.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing. I work around the same, or maybe even less sometimes, but because I'm in that position to do so, and I'm fortunate and lucky to be able to do that. When you're looking at it from a company point of view, it's so tough to be, and I've been there. Like I've been in this position where I've had phone calls when we've done work with US clients at like 2 a.m, and I was like, I'm doing a great job here.
Yeah.
I'm working hard. I'm going to hit my sales target. This is great. And then you look back and you think, what was I doing at 2 o'clock in the morning on the phone? Like this makes no sense at all. Do I think that companies are ever going to change that? No, because at the end of the day, there's no reason for them not to. Will government change it? It's hard to say, because I think now it's cool to be always on. It's like a badge of pride, like a badge of honor. I always work. I always do this. I'm always working. I'm a hard worker. I work 16, 17 hours a day. How many do you work? 8? Catch up. You need to catch up. Those are rookie numbers. So I think it's a cool thing. You see, like, you go online, Gary V's working all hours of the day and saying, look, hustle more, hustle harder. You see all these, like, these gurus talk about all of this.
Yeah.
So it is tough, but do I think that a change needs to happen? Yes, definitely. There needs to be something. Are we putting a band-aid on it? In a sense, yes, but I think by having conversations with people and again, it's about learning. It's that education of, okay, do you need to Tim Ferriss did the 4-hour work week book. How long ago was that?
A while ago.
It was a while ago now.
Yeah.
And it was like like people were like, what, you can work
4 hours a
4 hours a week? But actually, you pretty much can. Like, you can work 4 hours a day and get things done in an 8-hour day.
Yeah. It's about being efficient.
It's about being efficient.
Yeah.
And it's about doing that. But we don't give ourselves enough time. We have enough time now. This is the thing. We do have enough time. Life's so easy. You didn't have to go home. You don't have to go home and cook. You can order food. You don't have to sometimes sit in traffic whilst driving. You can get an Uber.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways of... We've cut time out so much that we've filled it with work. Yeah. And if we're not filling it with work and we're just sitting around or we're scrolling online, then people think, oh, I'm being lazy. And then you're taking a break from work after working 16 hours, and then you go online and you see someone saying, oh, I've worked 20 hours today, or
It's never enough.
It's never enough.
Yeah.
So there's a huge problem. I think it would be great if our government did something like that and said, look, it's illegal to do that, but don't think that's going to happen anytime soon
neither do I.
because even probably within the culture of how we think, like Dubai is a hard working place.
Yeah.
Dubai built itself in the last 50 years in next month. That wasn't done on 6 hours a day, was it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, true.
that's what they'll say. We worked hard. We worked all the hours of the day to be able to provide everything here now. And so it takes a long time to unlearn that. Maybe
Of course.
was that needed?
Yeah.
So do I think there's definitely needs to be a change, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But are we putting a band-aid over it? Yes and no. I think we are, to a certain extent, as a culture, as a whole.
Yeah, exactly.
100% we are doing that. And then how we can maybe change that is by having those conversations one by one, until, you know, someone says from the government that it's now illegal, and people will stop doing it then, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly.
You won't be getting no 10 p.m. Email saying I need this done in the next half an hour.
Yeah.
That'll stop.
Yeah.
And so I hope it does, because I think there's so much pressure anyway.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure to be successful now.
Yeah.
In our day and age, that and people think the only way to be successful is by working all the hours of the day.
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I most days I'll stop work at 4:30 and I'll finish then by stop work at 4:30, get all the emails done, and by 5 I'm finished, and then I'll purposely not look at my phone until the next day. And have I had people get in contact with me at 7 o'clock? Yes. And I thought, oh God, I should have emailed them back at that point. And like, what have I done?
Yeah.
And then you start worrying, like, oh, how long is it going to take them to get back? If I email them at 7:05,
they'll probably get back to me.
Got back to me then straight away. And so it's just understanding all of that and
100%
coming to terms with it. But yeah, no, I don't know. What do you tell your friends who are working this much? Like, what advice have you given them?
I tell this to my my fiance all the time. She works in social media, and
so she's working 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like 24 hours a day. Like, and it's not even a joke. Like, I've seen it, I've lived it, and I think one of the biggest issues. I think I agree with you in the sense that maybe from a law perspective or a government intervention perspective, that's not going to happen anytime soon, even though there is a big push for mental health. But I'm like, the way I see it, I'm like, okay, let's say, okay, you want to keep this hardworking thing, fine. At least there should be, okay, like in Europe, whatever, you compensate for overtime. If my life is overtime, that's not real. It can't, that doesn't make sense. That's not what it should be. That's not how it is. And I think one of the biggest issues, but also, okay, I'll say this, but I know why people do it, is boundaries. Saying like, putting your foot down and be like, no, I'm not going to reply to this email at 9 p.m. just because this client wants something at this time. He's not going to die if he gets it tomorrow, but they're super demanding and whatever. But then you think about, oh yeah, if you put your foot down, then like you said, Dubai is a high demand place for work and stuff. So they'll bring someone who would reply to that email at 9 p.m. So there's the fear of losing a job. And there's so much more to it. So I don't say this lightly. I'm not saying this just like, do it and everything will be fine. No, but I think people need to start setting more boundaries for themselves and standing up for themselves. Because if you don't, from like the higher ups it's not going to change, then you have to do something to change it for yourself, or you're just going to you'll be stuck in the same thing the whole time.
If you're a business owner and you have employees, then you should really try and look at ways of implementing some of this, because it will help you in the long term.
100%, yeah.
And also, if you're a business owner, you should be doing this yourself as well.
Yeah.
If Elon Musk can run 3 companies in a day and still manage to do all the things he does, then you can probably run 1 company and have a bit of a break.
Yeah.
And for employees, it's giving yourself that extra time to be able to do that. Okay, it's not going. Some companies are going to be really hard to to be able to shut off and not reply back, and then the you might get some words from your management and things like that, but you still have to give yourself, let them say that. And it's easier said than done. Like,
of
okay,
course, yeah,
fine,
that's why
like you said.
I don't take it. I
It's
say
not a
it
light thing
exactly.
to say,
Yeah, I
but
understand.
I do think it has to happen, but it goes back to the point. But companies don't need to do it, so what's the point?
Yeah, and that's 100%, and you're 100% right.
And this is as brutal. Sometimes the best way to be is like brutally honest.
Yeah.
And
Call it like it is.
Call it like it is.
Yeah.
People work hard because we've allowed it to happen.
100%.
If the people at the start were like no, we're not doing this, then okay, we've pushed on a bit too far.
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Okay, the 40-hour week's now turned into a 60-hour week.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's it. I think we've just allowed things to get on, and now we're trying to pull things back, and they're like, no, but you let us do this, and now we're sticking at this point.
Exactly.
I read a book, and they talked about it. This was like in the 50s. They were like, I think it might even be less than that. I think it was like the 20s when the book was in the 50s, but it was in the 20s when they talked about how that's when they started to introduce like the 30-hour or 40-hour work week around that point. And they said, how lucky are people going to be in the future when they'll have all this technology and they'll only be able to work 15 hours a week? I was thinking, where did we go wrong?
Yeah.
Because we had all this technology and now we work more.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the point?
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Like, don't get me wrong. People you should enjoy work, but I'd much rather be doing other things than working. Like, love your job, great. I love what I do. But
I also like a break.
Yeah, but there's other things that I'd much rather be doing as well sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I read that, I was like, wow, we really messed up at some point. Yeah. I don't know where or how.
100%.
But we did.
I think you made a good point that we've allowed it to happen. I think that's the key thing. So that's why my boundaries things is kind of like that's the best advice I was given. That's, I guess, the first defense you can put up to stop allowing that to happen. But again, I don't say this lightly. I understand the situation. So if this is what my advice would be, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
But moving on to my last question before we get on to the last two. So everyone talks about now mental health is the next pandemic, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I was doing my research, and after post-COVID here and globally now, 71% of employees have an expectation on their employer to offer mental health, some type of mental health services or counseling, or like to have some like a mental well-being strategy or something in place, because employees now want to feel more supported than before. And so 71% of employees want that.
Yeah.
But only at the time of reading this report, which was a couple months ago, 29% of companies in the UAE were offering it. So there's a huge disparity there. And so the question I wanted to ask you is it going to be like the internet bubble? Like companies who didn't adapt and start adopting the internet back then fell behind and were forgotten, and the whole world, moved forward? Same thing with like Nokia, same thing with like Kodak, like all the stories you hear about not adapting to where the world is moving. Do you think that's going to be the same with mental health now? Do you think companies that don't actually start caring for their employees, and because talent's in high demand, so like if you're not offering me this, I'm like, okay, fine, I don't need to work here. I'll go find a company that does has these strategies, these things in place, and does care about their employees' mental well-being.
Yeah.
And talent's in very high demand, but the supply is quite limited. So what do you say? Do you think this is going to be a similar thing to that? If you don't do this now, you're going to fall behind?
I think yes and no. I think it's important because it's important to look at what's happened before in the past. Like you said, 29% of employees are doing it at the moment, but then we need to look at the quality of what's actually being given there as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because if it's an EAP system, for example, then
whatever. Yeah.
You might as well just not have it because they're never going to use it.
Yeah.
Do I think that there's a bubble? Yes and no, because I think that some companies are going to do it, and they're always going to be. Look at Google. Remember when Google had like the bean bags, and they had the fruit bowls, and they had the foosball tables, and that was all cool, and every company wanted to do it, but even companies that tried to do it, and it was like a fad, right? And it kind of just worked for a bit, and then that was the thing with mental health. And you talk about companies may be potentially falling behind, I think if you offer the minimum, they'll be able to just move forward. They'll just go along. Yeah, we offer this. I think what you'll see is that people who really embrace it and put it into their culture, they're the ones that are gonna move forward. They'll attract.
Yeah.
Now, the be all and end all always is going to be salary.
Okay.
I don't think that's going to change. I think if there's perks and things like that, but if someone was getting offered, considerable amount more, they're always going to go for that most of the time.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't want to talk generally, but like as a general point of view.
Usually, yes. Yeah.
I think mental health needs to not be a perk of the job. It just needs to be part of the job.
Yeah.
That this is what happens. Because if it's a perk, then we look at them and, just like how we get X amount of days off, you have mental health is on that same level.
Okay.
It's not that on Fridays we do on Thursdays, we do dress down. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, I get you.
It shouldn't be like, and there's a fruit bowl if you want some free fruit. Like, if we're put in that category, then it doesn't matter if companies do it or not.
Yeah.
I think that it won't get anywhere. If we put it on the same level as you get this many days off a year, and we put it in that area, then things will definitely move forward. And if more and more companies start doing that, then the people that are not doing it, they'll fall behind quickly, because it'll be like, if you were getting paid 30,000 dirhams a month, but you only got 5 days off a year, or you're getting 20,000 dirhams a month, and you're getting 25 days, you'd take the 10th. So we need to put it at that level.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so if we do that, then 100% companies, the overall way of how we think towards mental health and
will change. Yeah.
Will change massively.
Yeah. I think you made a great point about, number one, that I think salary will always, we're generalizing here, but salary will be king usually. But also,
mental health can be queen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
love that. Awesome.
And they're the ones that make the decisions. They're more important.
Yeah.
We're going for that one.
Like what you said, not making it a perk of the job, but literally part of the job, and placing it on an importance level. Like, for example, like vacation days with which people look forward to for like the whole year. That time, that legitimate time off. Tariq, I just have 2 more questions for you. These are questions I ask all my guests. So, number one, looking back either personally or in your career, totally up to you. What are you most proud of for yourself?
What am I most proud of? It's a tough one. I don't really know what I'm most proud of. I think the most proud is I'm probably of how I've been as a parent.
Okay.
Overall.
Sure.
I think personally that has been the biggest thing for me. Just how I've been a parent, and I'm proud of how I've done that for the last couple of years. And, and how I've just adapted with that, and it's such a amazing thing. And I think that's my daughter's probably the thing that's made me the most proud. From a professional point of view, I think there's a lot more to come, but I think so far, there's been little things that make me happy. Definitely one of the biggest parts was setting this company up. That was obviously one. That was always a goal to be able to do that.
Sure.
But even if I go back, I remember moving from Coventry to London, I was very proud of. From moving from London to Dubai, I was very proud of. So kind of those big moments, but it's now trying to find the small moments in the big ones.
100%. And it's really interesting. I've had so many guests that question recently, especially over the last 2-3 months. When I ask them, when it comes to what are you most proud of, a lot of them are parents to my kids, or how they've parented and stuff. And I don't know. I guess I don't have kids, so I can't relate yet. But it's just something that I can't relate to yet. So I don't understand that feeling of pride that you must have. I get it, you know what I mean? But I don't feel it, so I think it's different. But I think it's a beautiful thing, and also I think I think taking any big leap that you're you don't know what the outcome is going to be. It's something you should be proud of. So with you, making those jumps and like opening my wellbeing lab is, you should be very proud of, man. And congrats.
Thank you.
Hopefully much more to come. And for my last question, Tariq, what is the message you'd like everyone to take home with them today?
I think the biggest message is to have better inner dialogues with yourself. I think that is something which we need to start doing more. The self-talk to each other, to ourselves, is sometimes the worst conversations we have with anybody.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I heard recently with one of the coaches was talking to me about is that they were coaching somebody and the person was talking to them so bad, that in the talk was so bad that they've now named that thing. They've named it. Oh, that's X person talking to me.
Mm.
And so the biggest thing now is, like, it's very easy to say, don't get me wrong, but to be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
Because that will affect so many different things.
Yeah.
It will affect not only your mental health, but it just affects everything.
100%.
So if that was one thing I could say to people, that would be it.
That would be it. Awesome, man. And I love that message. And I totally agree and resonate with it. Like you said, everything we've talked about today, I want people to, like, anyone listening, guys, it's easier said than done, but it's not impossible. So I don't want to take away the reality of how, hard things are. We're not sitting here just being like, do this, do that for mental health. Yeah. Like, so we have to also, I think we've been real today and called it like it is, how I like to say, this is how the situation is, this is where we are. Tariq, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This has been a fantastic conversation and a super in-depth one. I haven't had one of these, especially regarding mental health, in a while, so I've missed them. So thank you for that. Anyone who wants to work with you, connect with you, how can they get in touch? Just let us know.
So My Wellbeing Lab on Instagram. You can contact me directly on there. Also, www.mywellbeinglab.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well. That's my only social media that I have. So, yeah, I'm normally on there posting about something or another. So, yeah, catch me on there.
Sounds good. So, guys, you heard it here. You know how to get in touch with Tariq if you need to. Tariq, thanks so much again for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. Guys, so everyone listening, follow the podcast, subscribe, share it with your homies. Hope that helps. And as always, guys, hope it helps.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Cheers.